My name's Stuart Meade. I'm a septic system designer, 27 years in northern Indiana. We do a lot of commercial work, and we do a lot of residential work of all kinds. I sometimes get down into southern Indiana for commercial work, and my sister company, Meade Septic Supply, is the sledgehammer distributor for Indiana. So if you have questions on any of my services, please feel free to contact me. I want to thank everybody that's here. IOWPA is a great organization, and you need to remember IOWPA isn't just a conference you go to once a year. It's something that you belong to year-round, and it offers a lot of opportunities for all of you for education and for you to get involved to shape the conference. I know there are always opinions about how the conference went, and I think LA mentioned this yesterday. If you're interested at all, you should get onto the IOWPA board, and you can help shape those conferences. They require a lot of planning. You gotta get people reserved, many months ahead. So I encourage you to do that. There was a group of shrimp, these 5 shrimps, and they were walking on a dolphin's back. And there were these really cool shrimp, and they were walking along. And one of the shrimp fell down, tripped and fell on his face. And he got up and he turned to the other shrimp and he said, "I did that on purpose." So that's one I made up myself, so I know you haven't heard it before. So okay, so in this presentation, we're going to pretend that the perfect system was just installed. The installer's driving away from the site. Everything's graded perfectly, and he's got a big smile on his face. The weather's perfect. Not only was the installation perfect, but the whole process was perfect in this system, right? All the way from the homeowner, soil scientist, all the way to the installation, inspection, all of it was perfect. So what we're going to do is we're going to look through that process and see what that looks like. And so I've got opinions on how that went. So I'm going to show my steps, and then I'm going to want you to help me and add. And there's stuff in here for health departments, for soil scientists, for everybody is going to be included here. So we've got, here are the specs. We've got a new house, and we've got a 2-acre lot, and we've got a 1,500 square foot, 20-inch gravity flow system, okay? It's a flat lot, not a complicated system. Again, we're talking about process here, not necessarily system. Okay, so this is kind of a synopsis of what happened here. Of course, there was seamless communication in the entire process between the soil scientist and the homeowner and the designer, the installer, the inspector. Everything worked flawlessly. The soil scientist conducted the soil borings in exactly the right location, right, fellas? Right? And the design was 100% accurate. Made installation a breeze. You guys ever worked with a design like that where everything was set up right for you and it really helped out? That's how it's supposed to work, right? And then the permitting process was smooth, and it was so quick. It just happened so quickly. And then, of course, the installation happened. It was fast, and it was violation-free. So how on earth did this happen? And again, I'm going to list my thoughts here, and then I'm going to ask you for your input, so be ready. Our perfect process starts with a homeowner. Okay, so this homeowner researched the property to make sure it was buildable, right? Everybody in this room knows to do that. A lot of homeowners don't know that. A lot of homeowners that are coming from the city sewer and they're moving on to properties, they don't know. They just make assumptions, and assumptions are a big problem. And one of the things a homeowner should be doing is they should be, first of all, checking with the health department and say, hey, I'm looking at this lot over on the corner of these two county roads. Do you have any record of anybody building on this thing before? Are there any issues on this site? Do you have any records of soils for this site? So the health department's a great resource for that homeowner to check out the lot. It's the first stop. And the homeowner had the soil scientists onto the lot, right? They're checking for fill, they're checking limiting layers, water table, compaction, and ultimately the suitability for septic use. The homeowner also checked for easements. I remember one time somebody, a realtor, I don't know if there are any realtors in the room, but I remember a realtor sold a property that turned out there was a high tension wire running through it. 2/3 of the property was in the easement. They couldn't build on this property, but the realtor had sold it for somebody to build on it, right? So we got to look into these things. Are there easements? Are there lot restrictions? Are there setback issues? And then the homeowner did the best thing when they bought the lot. After they got it checked out, they made sure that the purchase agreement was contingent on them being able to get permits to do everything they wanted to do on that lot. And that, of course, means building a house. That means building a septic system. That means building a toy barn or a pool or whatever, or having enough room left over for a reserve area. So if needed, and this doesn't apply to this lot in particular, but if needed, they would have also checked on other kinds of easements, fiber optics, pipelines, regulated drains, right? A lot of times you got a county regulated drain running through property, and people don't know anything about it. So any other comments? Any comments on what the homeowner checked out to make this process perfect? What else did they need to do? And I'll remind you guys, I know a lot of you in the room, so I'm going to call on you if we don't have any comments. Perimeter drain outlet, yep. Flood zones, yep. That's right. What's that? Floor plan, yeah, floor plan, right. And how big's that house going to be, and how big's that system going to be? So here's some other things. Maximum slope, right? And we'll get into that a little bit later. It's kind of a pet peeve of mine. Here's the perimeter drain outlet. Here's the floodplain elevation. Yeah, you need to get these things checked out. What's that? Road access, yes. And some of these lots even have a non-access easement, right? If it's platted, the highway department will say, we want to make sure the driveway's here on the top of the hill, so when they're pulling out, they can see both ways. And some people have ideas, right, of exactly what they want, and sometimes that's a surprise, so you need to know about that. So let's start with a soil evaluation now. On this perfect site, all the utilities were marked, right? Even the ones that they don't usually mark, those ones were marked too. The owner met with a soil scientist on site, and also the health department met on site, right? And then all of you are thinking, well, how about the designer? Was the designer on site too? Well, in an ideal situation, the designer was on site. But as a designer, I can tell you we've got a really busy schedule, and if my schedule is just to adapt Mark McLean's schedule and follow him around, and then go to Larry Graham next, and Larry Huber, and just be jumping around, that's going to fill up my day. So I can't get anything done if all I'm doing is running around with soil scientists. So I'm hoping, and it usually works out, that the soil scientist is doing borings in the right location if they're meeting with a homeowner. So that usually works out. But ideally, yes, the health department, the designer would be there too. And the installer, yes. Thank you, Mark. And so soil scientists, ideally in this perfect situation, they flagged right where they did the soil boring, right? Not 3 or 4 feet away. And why is that a big deal? Well, that's a big deal because some health departments have very, very strict rules about how far you can be from the soil borings. And they say that some of these health departments want all, I'm talking to Jason back here from Steuben County, I guess. They want all soil borings we want 2, well, Steuben County wants 2 in the area of the absorption field, and they want the other one no farther than 10 feet away. And so if I show up and the soil scientist, we got 2 within, but I got a tree and I had to lay it a certain way, and that other boring is 13 feet away, right? Even if the soil borings are all the same and all good, that health department by policy is going to require more soil borings are done. So that's why it's important that that flag is put where the boring is done and not 4 or 5 feet away. So in this ideal situation, the soil scientist, measured off a point, maybe a property corner that had a nice fence post there or a telephone pole or something like that. And they wrote what the pole number was on there so that when we come out 9 months later to design the system, the first thing we can do as designers is lay out those where those flags were put in. And the evaluation in this perfect situation also accurately reported the percent slope on the site, right? Soil scientists, also the report was clear. The depth of any horizon of less than 0.25 was clear, or greater than 0.75. Presence of any disturbed soil, water table, soil structure, whether it's weak, medium, or strong, and including loading rates for every soil texture. And then the soil report was sent to the health department with no colored sheets, or if there were colored sheets or photos, they weren't faxed all around to everyone. Have you guys all seen what these look like? What an aerial photo looks like after it's been faxed 3 times? It's just a black sheet of paper. So that's not helpful. So hopefully email's being used, right? And this is becoming less and less of a problem, but we still see it. We still see it. And then the report was submitted to the health department with clear communication between the soil scientist and the local health department. So everybody has their own, all health departments have their own procedure as far as application goes. So I'm not going to get into that because I don't think there's particularly any best way to do that. I do like it when health departments require, this happens more in rural counties. Health departments will take on the soils specific to that application and not necessarily to the property itself. So they want to see the floor plan up front, right? And so when they issue the requirements are for a 3 or 4 bedroom house. They've already looked at the floor plan, counted bedrooms, and had an argument with the homeowner, and they've sorted that out. So by the time it gets to me and I see it's 3 bedrooms, then I know it's 3 bedrooms. And we can do it that way. Any comments for soil scientists? What else happened in this perfect evaluation that I didn't cover here?
Try to mark the holes with a fence post or something to identify where they were when the test was actually done.
Great. Mark them with something more permanent than a flag. Yep. That's great. And people move things, right? I mean, we know that horses and ponies move things. My truck was just attacked by a bunch of horses the other day, and they just all ran up and started biting my truck, took the paint off it, and I met some guys on an Amish school job the next day. I said, after we talked, I said, I want you to see my truck. Come up here and see my truck. And I pointed to where the teeth marks were on the truck. I said, do you know what did that? And he said, no, was it stuff from the road? And I said, no, it was horses. And they, are you kidding? So I know it's not, I know I'm just unlucky apparently. But at least it wasn't a new truck. Of course, a new truck wouldn't have been parked in the field with horses anyway. Anything else for soil scientists? You guys like a chatty soil scientist, one that tells you about soil morphology and all that, or do you want a guy to just to keep his mouth shut and turn his auger? What do you think? All right, well, let's talk about this slope issue, because this is something that burns me sometimes. So this is a clinometer, right? This is a little device. It's about $150, and you look through it, and as you tilt it, it'll tell you the percent slope. Now, it's not the most perfect way to shoot slope. You know, when we're shooting slope, or you guys as installers, you pull a tape on site, and then you take your rotating laser and you shoot shot here, and then you shoot a shot here 30 feet away, and then you subtract the difference and divide it by the length, and you get your percent slope. But a clinometer works quite well. The problem with a clinometer is that people don't know what to backsight to. And the key here is that you're backsighting to something that's the same level as your eyeball, and you're holding the clinometer. So my suggestion is, if you got a soil auger, you go to the top of the hill and then you turn that soil auger so the handle's eye height, and then you walk down and you look back, and you can sight back to that handle, and you know that's eye height. And of course, you could mark a tree the same way. And if you've got a short auger here, what you could do is auger it down, and then you can get on your knees and sight back to that handle at that same height. I recently had a site that we drove. I took my associate Kevin and we got in our truck. We drove an hour and a half to a job site. The soil report said that the slopes were 10 to 15%. Okay, you know where this is going, right? We show up on site. I get out my laser. It looks steep, right? And I've got a 6% radar. So when I go on a site for mound system, I walk on a site and little sirens go off in my head and go, oh, we're really close to 6 here. I can tell right away. And if you have a lot of experience doing that, what you realize, if you're around slopes that are greater than that, then that slope's going to look less. But if that's the steepest slope in the area, you're going to think maybe it's a little bit more. But I showed up on this site that the soil scientist said the slope was 10 to 15. We shot it, and it was 25. So we got back in the truck, drove back home an hour and a half, and I sent the client an invoice for our time, which of course he didn't pay. And so it's really important that these are accurate on these reports. And a clinometer can get you really, really close, get you within 1%. So I encourage you to look at that. And of course, health department's going to be looking at the maximum slope too. So don't give me an average slope. Let's look at the maximum in the area where the borings were done and get that recorded. Okay, we're going to health department requirements. We're going to start with, of course, a smiling homeowner meets with a smiling health department, right? And that communication happens. The local health department hands the homeowner instructions on step-by-step instructions on how to get a permit from their department. And the homeowner understands them, right? Understands everything that's going to happen here. And so then the health department reviews a copy of the soil report. And again, application processes are different. But ultimately, they're going to issue requirements. And when they issue requirements, they're going to attach a copy of the soil boring report. Now, if that's in person or if that's through email. And because a lot of times as designers, and of course that's the work I know, us designers will get the health department requirements, but we don't have any soil borings. And so then I have to ask, please send the soil boring report. And so if we keep that stuff together, hopefully that gets around and everybody gets it. And I don't have to ask the soil scientists then individually for that. And the health, we won't get all into the health department stuff too much, but the health department did not ask for things that did not apply to this site. So remember, the health department's been on the site with the soil scientists, so they know that a diversion swale isn't going to be necessary, and they know that the soils are all very, very consistent. And this is you know, it's a well-drained soil. I mean, it's not great soil, but the soil borings are all consistent. Okay, design. First of all, the designer went on site, right, and laid out the system. They pulled tapes, they shot grade with a laser. They got everything laid out on site. All the trenches were flagged, or they were marked with fence posts. We used to carry fence posts around, but I tell you what, that becomes a labor. We find it's not really a problem, because if we're flagging a system, someone's going to install that in the next few months, and usually there are enough flags left that it's pretty easy to know what's going on. All the important measurements were taken. And I say that because there are a lot of measurements that aren't terribly important that sometimes health departments require. And we've got a stable and easy to locate benchmark, elevation benchmark that's not going to get moved, right? So that's obviously an important thing too. All relevant wells were shown on the drawing, and a 2-scale design was well organized. I prefer to have a material key and an elevation key for the installer to follow. And the design was clear, uncluttered, and accurate, with a focus on the items needed for the installation, right? Because that's what the design should be. It should have the information that the installer needs. And actually, if the health department is requiring stuff, they should always think, is this something the installer needs? Because if the installer doesn't need it, in my opinion, there's a very good chance that doesn't need to be on that design. And then the designer, when they finish that design and they send it out, they should stamp that with a not yet approved by health department. Because once that plan goes out, it's going to get circulated, right? And you got to know what design has been approved and what hasn't been approved. So this is the first step. The first step is to stamp that plan with a not yet approved by health department, okay? Now maybe in the end we'll see that there was no changes, and you'll know that there are no revisions, so the copy you have is good. But this is an important thing to have. Okay, so here's a little side note here. Tips for health departments for designs: don't require float control elevations. We started doing this a couple years ago. How many installers? I'm going to ask you both ways. How many installers set their floats using a rotating laser and their rod? See all the hands? How many guys set the tank at the right depth and then measure off the bottom with a measuring tape to set their floats? Everyone, right? So why are we requiring these on a design, right? It's just, to me, it's clutter. It might be a slightly easier way for the health department to check the float settings, but no installer, I say, has ever set those floats using that. Well, if you've got a, again, you're talking to a designer who's always got a scale drawing of the cross-sectional view of that tank. So I suppose if you're sketching something out, and you're yeah, well, and that's something that that you could, that would be helpful, like I said, in someone reviewing that. But that's a whole nother conversation about where we should be counting the static lift from, and a lot of people count it from that bottom float. I argue the more accurate way to do that by far is to do from the bottom of the pump. That's a more accurate way to do it. That's how the static lift should be. You exaggerate that situation, you bury a tank 30 feet deep, or you have let's say you have a dry well that's 30 feet deep, and you have the float set way up at the top, so you got 20 feet of water. You're saying that pump doesn't see that 20 foot of static lift? It sure does. What you've got going on in that tank, you've got the water pressure pushing down and pushing some water and helping that pump raise that water. But the faster that pump is pumping, the less that's going to influence that static lift anyway. So really the accurate way to do it, and of course the water level also pumps down in that tank. But the more accurate way to do that is to be taking that static lift from the bottom of that pump. So that's kind of a side thing, but that's how we find it important to do it. Any other comments on this slide? Okay, so now we're on to the health department review. So all the health departments can get involved and give comments on this. So I argue, and I'll tell you a secret, I was a health department person for 5 years before doing this for 27 years. So I did a lot of inspections and a lot of plan reviews. And somebody take their pill. The most important part of the plan review for a health department person is to visit the job site. This is more important than looking at stuff on paper, because you don't always know stuff on paper is correct. So as the health department, in this perfect process, they're going to go on site, they're going to take the design, they're going to walk around, they're going to look at the system as it's flagged, and they're going to go, that looks right. Yeah, that looks right. That's the most important part. So that's the first thing that needs to happen in their plan review. So when they're on site again, they're going to look at the trenches and say, that looks good. They're going to verify the neighbor's well locations. They're going to see that there are no surface water diversion swales, concave shapes, that kind of thing. And they're going to verify the soil boring locations are correct on the design. So that's when they pull out the soil boring report and they go up, measure off that telephone pole. Yeah, this is where the borings were done. Yes? Yes, absolutely. It absolutely, and you know what? That's something I didn't put in here. That's absolutely right. You said that the system needs to be roped off or marked off, and there are different ways of doing this. And I always tell people that this is something that's very important. It's something that health departments are looking for. But realistically, this is one of these things when we talk about a prescriptive code and we're talking about making requirements for something, what we really need is we just need that site to be protected, right? And the farther it is from where the building is going to happen, kind of the less protection it needs to effectively protect that system. You got something up next to the house, you really, really have to do a lot to keep construction off it. But if it's off up in the corner of the field and it's bordered on two sides by a fence and it's 300 feet away, don't make somebody put fence all around that system. It's already got fence on two sides, and nobody's going to be driving their truck back there anyway. So this is one of those things when we come up with requirements, health departments have to use some judgment on that and maybe require more in one place, maybe be a little bit more lax than the other. But the goal here is to protect the site. And so that's what needs to happen. And so then the health department goes back to the office and they do the rest of the review here. On site, and they're checking the elevations, and they're checking slopes and the pipes and the pipe specs and that kind of thing. And so voila, in this perfect situation, no revisions are needed. right? Health department finds that everything's perfect on the design, and they issue the permit within 4 days. And so when the health department issues the approval, one of the things they're going to do is they're going to stamp this plan approved, and they're going to sign their name on there that, John Smith approved the design, and they're going to put a date on that. And then they're going to take that design, they're going to make a copy for their files, and maybe they require the soil science or the designer submit 2 sets of plans so that they don't have to make copies, because ours are usually 18 by 24 sheets, maybe they don't have a copy of that big. So go ahead and ask for 2 copies when we submit those. So that way they can stamp it approved, they can attach it to the copy of the permit, and say it's approved by the health department. And they're also going to notify the designer. A lot of times, I always say the perfect design is we design a system for someone, send it out, and we never hear from anybody ever again, right? That's what a perfect design is. Nobody has any questions. Nobody has any revisions. The system doesn't quit working within a couple years. It goes, so let's see here. And then the homeowner, I was saying that the homeowner lets the designer know that it's been approved. So then the designer can print a copy that says approved by the health department. And that's what we do with systems. This is what we do, especially with commercial systems. We send out a hard copy because the commercial systems are being reviewed electronically. They're sent down to the state as a PDF. And so I sent out an original copy with an invoice, and then later on, once it's approved, they get a copy that says approved, and I send it to the county health department as well. So the health department needs to really let the designer know that that system's been approved, so that the designer can send out copies, or at least let them know, hey, there were no revisions, so the copies you have are good, And so the health department's going to hand the homeowner the permit card, and it's going to have a copy of the approved design it's stamped approved by the health department, so they know. And they're also going to give them a pamphlet on the care and feeding of their septic system in this perfect situation. And the homeowner's going to read it and learn all about what they should and should not do and follow that. Anything else for the health department? Back here. Yep, approved date. Yep. And of course, if the designer did do any revisions, they need to mark on there that they revised on this date. They labeled the soil borings or something like that, and whatever the revision was, so that somebody can see what the changes are on that plan. Health department review. Yes. Yeah, getting access to the property, and this falls back to that whole thing of perfect communication, right, between everyone. And as a designer, we're told, yeah, the site is this and this, and we show up, and they're fenced all around it, and the wire's hot, and sometimes they're animals, sometimes they're not. But yeah, we've had to, with permission, cut fences, take fences down, put them up, and but it also makes it confusing as to where you're supposed to be. So, and muddy drives that aren't, installed yet, and get your. Yep. Should at least know that ahead of time to know what to expect. Phil?
Any future pole barns or ponds going to be built to be marked on the plan as well?
Yep.
If they're not going to be built right away, even just kind of in future, it really helps even the installer to set up things for the septic system for a future, putting a bathroom or something in a pole barn or detached garage.
Yep. We often will hear, oh, well, that's where I wanted to do that. You can't put the system there. Oh, well, somebody should have told us that, a while back. So again, this is that communication that needs to happen. You got to ask the questions. People aren't going to just give you the information. You got to ask. You got to remember to ask. I do. I have a checklist that I give people, and it asks for all that information. a rough sketch site plan with all their buildings and pools or whatever they want to do, if there's going to be a lookout or walkout. And, that's the other thing we get into is, well, that's where the walkout, we're going to walk out there. So I need to know if the tank's going to be in the walkout, if they're going to gravity flow the whole house, or they're going to, no plumbing in the basement, or they're going to have just, a little sewage ejector pit down there for the sink down there, whatever. Yeah, we need to know all that information. Yeah, yeah.
Stuart,
Yes.
should the health department be taking physical elevations of the site when they go to the first site visit?
They can if they want to.
There is nowhere in the rule that it tells you where you have to take that elevation in that 3-foot trench. Sometimes you can I usually put it in the center, but sometimes you have to put it the 18 inches over to the side to get the elevations to work out. How does the health department know where I took that elevation at?
Well, and this is why even if you go out and let's say you got to go back outside on site and shoot elevations again, your elevation is going to be different, right? If you had to go back on site the next day, reshoot elevations, submit them to the health department might be surprised to see that they're different. But that's because the ground is bumpy, and that's not something that we talk about. And we could do a whole thing about design. A term I've never heard when we talk about laying out a system is twisting. A lot of sites twist, right? We have a 2% slope on this side, and we got an 8% slope on that side. Well, we know how to do that with fingers where we're fanning them out, but how do you lay out a rectangular mound system on a twisting site? What's the best practice with that? I've got my opinion on that. But yeah, things are lumpy, and LA showed that photo earlier of the frozen plowed field, and I've got pictures like that showing my rod and showing that if I scoot over 3 inches, we're going to drop 5-6 inches. So yeah, you got to. That's a good point, that the site is not the earth is not perfect with linear slopes or flat slopes or no slope, whatever. It's bumpy. I'm always noticing these things. We have an area, the top of a hill, and then it goes a little bit concave, and then it goes a little convex, and then it twists a little, and then it goes back concave, and then this is how the real life is, and this is what we all see in the field. So, good point. But I thought you were asking if the health department might be doing checking elevations themselves with their own rotating laser. I know any health departments in the room have a rotating laser that they check. You pull it out sometimes? No? I know of one health department. I know they got a rotating laser, and one of the staff has been there for about 12 years. And I said to him, you ever check elevations with your rotating laser? And he said, what rotating laser?
And where exactly do you calculate when you put on your drawing the percentage of slope? The highest slope, the lowest slope, the average slope, the invert slope?
Right. And that's going to be what the health department wants. And I've had health departments tell me for instance, mounds, they're interested in the maximum slope. Well, some say they're interested in the average slope, as long as the average slope is less than 6%. So you got to know what your health department, how they're interpreting that, because they're the ones who are going to be enforcing it. Anybody else?
Hey, Stuart.
Yes.
One thing too we should watch is for the neighbor wells, where the neighbors. Most times you're on a big lot, it's no big deal. But if you're on a fairly tight lot and the house right next door, a few years ago I got on one, was getting ready to start laying one out to put right there, and went over looked the next door. Then the neighbors had like a doghouse almost right over top of the well. You wouldn't even know it was there.
They're trying to hide it from you. They know you wouldn't look in a doghouse. Huh? We had a guy up in Simonton Lake. There was an empty lot up there, and the guy didn't want a house built on it. He was a neighbor, so he put in a well right on the property line. And he didn't use the well, but he drilled a well just to keep them from building.
And Stuart, what do you do if the neighbor won't let you come on their lot to locate their well and it's not above ground?
Well, that's hard. You got to leave a note, or you got to let your client know that I can't get onto this site, or if they're dogs sometimes, right? sometimes, oh my goodness, the dogs, I keep the truck door open, you know, in case we gotta make a dive into the truck. I've got a couple disto laser rangefinders that we can use to check distances to wells if they're above ground, you know, and we can see them. I can do that off a property. I've had people say, you're not coming onto my property, and I figure out how to get that done. We can also do 2-point offset with our GPS equipment. But as long, obviously what we're looking here to make sure that that's at least 50 feet from the well or from the system. And if we absolutely know that, it doesn't really matter if we're off by a foot or so, you know, but usually we're right on. Okay, we're gonna go to installation day. Okay, so the weather is perfect. What's perfect temperature? 72? Okay, so we got 72, and the installer's wondering if he should be fishing instead. So, with the installer on site, he pulls up, he's got his permit card, right? And he's reviewed the attached design, making sure it's the same or different than the original one. He's seeing if there's any differences there, if there were any revisions. He posts the permit on site so everybody can see it. And here's the newly poured wall. It's got the building sewer location and elevation is correct for our 20-inch trench depth. Everything's going to work out just great. And of course, soil wetness is not an issue on the perfect installation day. Of course, the excavator found all the trenches, found the benchmark. All design elevations were quickly verified. Set up a laser, make sure everything's right before you get started. And the system installation was smooth and quick. And he leaves open what the health department needs to do their inspection, right? Because the health department and this installer have this great relationship, and he knows what they need, and he's gonna keep what they need open so they can do the proper inspection. So that after the system's installed, the health department calls the health department and lets them know that they can come out the next morning and install it. And the installer didn't worry again about violation because he knows what this health department needs, because the health department is very, very consistent, right, in what they require. They're strict, but they're very consistent. And consistent is the word that makes everybody's job easier. It makes the installer's job easier, and it makes the health department's job easier, right, if they're consistent. And so, what else happened on installation day that made this perfect? What's your ideal day? How did this happen? How about they delivered clean stone? Right? All materials were available that you needed. No issues with tanks or anything else. Yeah, Steve? I see. Yeah. So you're calling in the inspection before you install it, just to, unless they could come out same day, right? Yep. Okay. Okay. So we're done with installation. Here comes the inspection. So the health department's sitting in their office. They get a call from the installer, and they go, "Oh, you want an inspection? We'll be out there as soon as we can," right? The local health department gives a courtesy call to the installer and says, "We'll be out by 3 o'clock, or we'll be out by 9:30 in the morning," something like that. And so the health department shows up. They check the system and make sure everything is right. All this information here, the slopes, D-box tees, depth of gravel, all that stuff, right? And then they also check well separation. They check separation to the building and to structures. Everything was good. System was approved, and a green tag was issued. So they approved the system, and they put that note in a obvious location. Now, way back when I was doing it, that green tag would go in the distribution box or kind of hang on the side of that. Is that where the health department's put an approved or a red tag? In the riser, tank riser? See, when I was at the health department, there were no tank risers. So that's why. And so after they approve it, they gave a courtesy call to the installer, letting them know that it's approved, right? Again, that communication, open communication. Any comments on the inspection? They send one to the installer of the inspection. Yep. And of course, in our perfect situation here, the design works as an as-built, right? Because it's what was installed. But in some circumstances, that doesn't happen. That's not what we're talking about today. But when that doesn't happen, are your guys' health departments doing as-built drawings as part of their inspection? Yeah? Are they asking you to do it? No? Okay, yeah, my experience was that the health department does as-built drawing. And of course, now that we have risers on tanks, you know where tanks are these days because it's got a riser on it. So, but the location of the trenches and distribution box, all that should be carefully noted. Anything else on the inspection? All right. So we've got a happy ending here, and everybody got paid, right? Everyone got paid. So any comments or thoughts, additional thoughts on this? How often does this happen? LA, how often does that happen?
Everybody I was listening to back behind me said, why are we talking about a perfect world? It's never happened for us.
Well, of course, the whole purpose is to try to strive for that, right? Because again, it makes everybody's job easier when things go smoothly. So everybody that's part of the process. So, all right. Well, thank you.